I see one of the questions in the chat is, would it be easier to compare before and after weights of the fabric to wash and dry it after you dig it up? And I'll let Karla comment on this more, but that was one of the things we thought about as well. It just it wasn't as easy as we thought it might be.
Yeah, I think that was our first idea with it, just trying to weigh it out. The problem with that is when you take the fabric and after a certain time of the fabric being on the mesh bag, it just starts tearing apart. So that's one thing, you would have to be picking every single thread of the fabric from the mesh bag. And in other cases, it just, the dirt or the soil just sticks to the fabric. So it's ends up being more weight when it's actually degraded, but that's because there's so much stuff stuck into the fabric. And that's a little bit hard to separate. I still haven't thought about a way of like how to keep the fabric and wash the rest of it out, but that would be a good way to compare it too.
So the mesh bags that we used, the first time we tried just burying, fabric in the soil like this, a measured piece of fabric, we couldn't even find all the pieces of it when we went to dig it up. So then the mesh bags was how we altered that so that we could take the mesh bags out, they wouldn't degrade, and then we have to peel those open and look at the fabric within it. And so by that time, you could see a lot of the fabric was very degraded to the point where, like Karla said, you would have to be picking pieces off of that bag with tweezers. And even then you probably wouldn't get all of the pieces. So that's kind of why we went to just some visual method. If we can just get that exposed and take a photograph of it, can we generate a percent degraded or a percent remaining value for that soil without having to try to remove it from that mesh bag. And the bags are black, so that helps to have that as a background. I see the next question is, how likely is it that this methodology could be simplified to the point of being able to use a smartphone and app with on-the-fly results? And I think that's what Andrew, our undergraduate student, that's what he was working on with the Python coding and using a smartphone app. And Karla, I'll let you cover that some more. I don't know how far along he is. Andrew is kind of one of those people that he sees a problem and he'll start like digging into a way to fix it. And things that maybe we don't know how to do or we hadn't thought of. And I thought it was really creative that he was working on this cell phone app like before we even figured out if we could do it on on a computer with photos. So I'll let you talk a little more, Karla, about his work on that.
Yeah, so what I was talking to him about yesterday was that, and he was more on the side of like doing the code for putting it on Python. He says it is there's a good possibility to do that. So yeah, I would say it's I don't think it's impossible at all. The problem will be you will still need to have some kind of a setup to take the pictures, because I think that's one of the most important parts of this, just take a good picture of it. But yeah, he seemed to be very positive that that's a thing that we can do in the near future.
I was just looking back here. I see that I missed a question that was posted prior to those others. What is your definition of a fertile soil? And again, I don't need to answer it. Karla could certainly answer that, but I think when we set out to do this project, it was not necessarily to measure whether a soil was fertile or not, but to measure microbial activity in soils with this fabric degradation method. But I think, again, we're not soil scientists, we're engineers and mechanized systems kind of folks. So to us, we kind of use that term interchangeably with a healthy soil or a high quality soil. So a soil that can sustain plant growth and that cycles nutrients effectively and efficiently and produces, healthy and substantial plant habitat. So
Yeah.
I don't think we have a real official definition of soil fertility, but certainly a healthy and productive soil.
Yeah, I would say, and this is just from me, just putting together all the concepts that I've read, but for me, a fertile soil is capable of sustaining life by itself. So it's an ecosystem where a lot of things interact and just have that connection with each other that makes it possible for different organisms to exist and to supply for nutrients for the other and to supply for nutrients for the plant. So but that's just what I've been reading about in the last few days. And then I see there's other questions, if the results were different when I used the scale, and what is the minimum accuracy we're looking for in the study. I think so. We did use a scale. I can go back so you can see there's a these that square in the background of the picture. That's actually what we use initially for measuring the pieces of fabric and just cutting them in the right size. And so I decided to use that in the background so that we have a reference in the image. So what I started out doing is kind of like, I don't know how to say that in English, but so if you know that this square over there is 12 by 12, then you would first measure that area in pixels with any of the programs. And then you can measure the area of the remaining fabric the same way. So the program selects that areas of fabric and gives you the amount of pixels. So if you want, yeah, you can get the area in a unit like inches or centimeters, or you can get percentages of degradation. So I think that's what I relate to the minimum accuracy. I don't have an actual, I guess, minimum.
I think if you go back a couple slides, Karla, to where you're comparing the hand count versus the pictures. So this one here on the left. So when we say hand count, that was where, again, Karla would have measured the dimensions of the square before it was buried. And then when it was removed, we had a clear plastic grid that you could lay over the top of that sample and make sure it was, covering the entire sample, and then kind of color in or count how much of that grid of each square was filled in with fabric still, or was lacking fabric. And that our hand count value meant is based on that grid, how many square centimeters of fabric were degraded or remained. And then that value is compared to the percent degradation and percent fabric remaining by the other two visual methods. So that was sort of the standard. And then we were comparing the imaging software related to those manual counts done with the grid. So I hope that's getting at what the question was about. But I think, like you show in this slide, we have, pretty good fit of lines when we're comparing the hand count to each of the different methods. They all seem to be, 90, 92, 95% accurate or in line with the hand count method. So we were pretty pleased with that. We'll continue to work on it and see if we can improve that some with less, having to do less work on the photos and less editing. But for our first time trying to figure that out, I felt like it was pretty successful for us.
Yeah. And even with using the grid, it's kind of hard to tell if that's like exactly the right number, because it depends a lot on like if you're standing in front of it, if you're standing like more on a 90-degree above it or something, like counting, it's also has its things to it. So But we actually compared different people estimating with the different types of methods that we use. So they were all pretty consistent, I guess, probably like 2 or 1% off within comparing what people did. So yeah.
So this is really interesting, Karla, and I think there's a lot of challenges that moving forward on this, but there's certainly I think a lot of interest. I know everybody's very familiar with the soil undies, and we always like to get data to kind of help back some of that stuff up. So there's one just popped in from Ben. Have you thought about digital soil morphometrics? Might be worth looking into. If you can do some research on how to differentiate between colors, thoughts, comments?
Yeah, I think I think just like the post up above about the Campio app that measures reflectance in the crop canopy, I think there are some techniques out there that we could explore that might improve the accuracy of our imaging. And so I've tried to jot these down as we were going, and probably will kind of pursue those as a next stage as we continue to refine the process. But I appreciate the thoughts.